Hey everyone, got a fun one for us today. We're going to discuss the true meaning of Hotel California by the Eagles. There's a lot of rumors and speculation about that song, and there has been for a long time. But, I did some research and I'm hoping that I can answer that question once and for all for everyone. So be sure to stick around. It's going to be great. All right. Hotel California can easily give one a bit of a creepy feeling, both musically and lyrically. The music is played in the key of B minor, which contributes to the ominous sonic landscape. Don Henley sings lead vocals, and there's just a touch of despair and regret in his voice throughout the song. It all works together to make it one of the most interesting songs you'll ever hear on the radio. It had a working title of Mexican Reggae. No wonder it was such a huge success. It can still be heard quite often today, and it is the most famous song ever written by the Eagles. It's been covered countless times and still manages to make an appearance in modern pop culture, even though it was released over 40 years ago. Interestingly, it has also been rumored to be dedicated to Satanism and the occult. More specifically, there has been a rumor going around that's nearly as old as the song itself, that the song is a direct reference to the late Church of Satan founder Anton LaVey. As a longtime fan of the song and someone who really loves rock music lore and solving good mysteries, I was determined to find out the real meaning behind Hotel California. I've done my research, I've listened to quite a few different opinions and put together my own thoughts on the matter, and I encourage you to do the same. But let's try to set the record straight as best we can. I'll tell you what I think about some of the most popular ideas about what the song means. We're going to cover all the different sides of the story. Just as a quick reminder, Hotel California is the title track from the Eagles' album of the same name, which was released as a single in February 1977. Writing credits go to Don Felder for the music, and both Don Henley and Glenn Frey share credit for the lyrics. Commercially, Hotel California reached the #1 position on the Billboard Hot 100 and reached the top 10 of several international charts. Okay, good. We're on the same page, so let's begin. A lot of people hear this song for the first time and think to themselves, wow, that's some beautiful music. And then they try to figure out the lyrics. They're nice words when being sung, indeed, but maybe a little too vague when trying to figure out their meaning on your own. Confused, many will then go online to look them up. After a quick search, a rabbit hole of information opens up, and an hour later, you're on board with everything you just read, heard, and saw. It's pretty easy to feel a little, uneasy. Did you just discover that this song you love has been a lie this whole time? Think back real quick to the first time you heard one of the most memorable lines of the song. And in the master's chambers, they gathered for the feast. They stab it with their steely knives, but they just can't kill the beast. What a visual, right? I can see why a lot of people would be led to believe that there's something more to it after all. The song doesn't try too hard to cover up some of its most obviously darker references, such as the lyrics I just mentioned. The funny thing about that is that in many cases, it's the other way around in pop music. Listeners of the Top 40 radio might hear a song with lyrics that are mostly lighthearted or seem to be about happier themes, but are actually trying to cover up themes of drugs, sex, and violence. One of the most peculiar pieces of the puzzle is that Anton LaVey was rumored to be in the photograph on the back of the album. If you look closely, you will see that there is, in fact, a blurry image of a bald man with a goatee on the balcony. If you're not familiar with Anton LaVey, he started the Church of Satan in California in 1969. Oh, what's that? Could that be another clue for us all? I mean, look at these lyrics. So I called up the captain. Please bring me my wine. He said, we haven't had that spear here since 1969. Clearly a reference to Anton, right? So now we have the hotel's captain, and it's unclear to me why a hotel even has a captain, talking about not having a spirit there since 1969. Might he mean the Holy Spirit of God when he is referring to a spirit? Okay, I can see where they're coming from again. But is this the real meaning of the song, or is there something else? I'd like to just briefly tell you about my experience as someone who lived in the LA area for a short time. The first time I ever heard Hotel California must have been sometime in the 1990s, either on the radio or on MTV. The group was making a sort of comeback, and I remember it being a pretty big deal at the time. I saw them perform the song on TV, and I was blown away by their musicianship. That was some very intricate guitar work those guys played, especially compared to most of the grunge and punk bands that I was a big fan of at the time. And as a guitarist, I knew that being able to play something like that would really mean I'd achieved a certain level of competency. I did eventually learn to play the rhythm guitar parts, but never the solo. But hey, maybe one day, right? The first thing that struck me when I heard the song was the overall haunting beauty of it. There was this really exotic and beautiful sounding Spanish guitar, and they were playing these strange rhythms alongside straight 4/4 drums that mixed in some Latin drum beats here and there. And of course, there were the mysterious lyrics that left me thinking about them for days and weeks afterward. I'm a native of Northern California. Naturally, some of my first thoughts were about the actual place the title alluded to. Where is this hotel? Can I go there? The song felt like a complete story to me, which was also very different from the vague lyrics of, say, Smells Like Teen Spirit. I love those types of lyrics too, don't get me wrong. Nirvana was and still is a favorite of mine. But Hotel California actually felt like a movie within a song to me. Furthermore, it was kind of like a creepy mystery movie within a song. I love that, and I still do. I imagined maybe the song was inspired by a haunted house story, but instead it was about a hotel rather than a house. Maybe some sort of evil spirits were holding the narrator captive. The song just has this brilliant way of bringing you in and putting you in the story. The truth is, the lyrics are meant to be open to interpretation. As I got a little bit older, not much older, I think my interpretation was shaped by my personal experiences. As I mentioned before, I'm a guitarist, and I was born and raised in Sacramento, California. As a teenager and into my early 20s, I really wanted nothing more than to become a successful guitarist and to be in a successful band. When I was about 20 years old, my best friend and I moved to Burbank, California together, just outside of Hollywood. We had already been in bands together for years, and we had hopes of forming a new band when we got there. LA was the place to make our dreams come true. We would hit the big time if we just moved to where all the other rock stars are, right? Well, I can tell you firsthand that everything they say about Los Angeles is true. The good, the bad, and the ugly of it all. I can remember walking over to the Vaughn's grocery store and the little shops around it, right near our apartment. The streets that took me there were all very well maintained and full of trees and abundant sunshine. Every morning I would see some of the most physically fit people outside, walking tiny dogs or jogging along the sidewalk. The ones who had plastic surgery or a fake tan were easy to spot. Some of them looked like all they did was jog or go to the gym all day. And this was just in Burbank, mind you, not even Beverly Hills. And I'll admit, I sort of wanted all that for myself too. I also began to further explore the actual Hollywood area and the surrounding bars, infamous music venues like the Troubadour, and all the seedy places your mom doesn't want you going to. This is where some of the most famous rock and roll venues and bars in the world are. I dream of playing at the Whiskey A Go-Go. I could stare at its front entrance and picture one of my favorite frontmen, Jim Morrison, crashing through the doors and spilling out onto the street a drunken mess. While those venues are mostly still there and still doing what they do, the reality of everyday life is different. So far, the time I've been referring to, when I was actually there, was right about 2003 or so. Now, in 2022, we know that Los Angeles could use a little help. But even back then, there was some things that were just plain sad to see. The glitz and glamour that it is famous for is plainly overshadowed by people living on the streets, drug addicts, panhandlers, and crime. And believe me, I wish it wasn't so. I love California and wish it all the best. It especially hit close to home for me when I saw so many guitarists presumably living on the street. They were there trying to make change for food by busking music all day. That wasn't the life I was looking for. I wanted it to be different. I wanted it all to be better, but it wasn't. And it quickly had an effect on me and my psyche. Being hundreds of miles away from my family and friends made it even worse. Some of what I want to describe about my feelings there might be considered, well, a little spooky or mysterious. There are all these little gift shops on pretty much every corner of Sunset Boulevard or Hollywood Boulevard. I remember going inside and picking up the postcards and little tourist knickknacks and just feeling kind of sad. Every product had Marilyn Monroe's or James Dean's face on it. And let's not forget the Hollywood Walk of Fame with all the names of movie stars printed on the sidewalk where you step on them one by one. I would always get the weirdest feeling. I felt what I can only describe as an energy or a presence of something when I was there. An amalgamation of all the lost souls who came to LA to be a part of the entertainment industry, perhaps those who never made it mixed in with those who did, but were still dissatisfied with the outcome. I moved back to the place that I was born pretty quickly. I didn't stay in Burbank very long at all. The whole thing was too overwhelming for me. Not only was it incredibly difficult to do what I wanted to do as a musician, but the overall atmosphere of the place was just putting me in a bad mood. It was giving me the creeps. Many years later, I met the woman who would eventually become my wife. I didn't bring up my short stint in Burbank with her until we'd been dating for a little while. I finally told her about it one day, and to my surprise, she looked at me and said, "No way, I live there too." She told me she had moved to the LA area before we met too, and she also ended up feeling that it was just a bit too much. Welcome to the Hotel California. Such a lovely place. Such a lovely place. Such a lovely face. They living it up at the Hotel California. What a nice surprise. What a nice surprise. Bring your alibis. There's an idea that Hotel California is a metaphor for someone going to the afterlife and being judged by God. The narrator has no idea where he's gone, only that it could be really, really good or really, really bad. The evidence for this, they say, starts right at the beginning of the song. Up ahead in the distance, I saw a shimmering light. My head grew heavy and my sight grew dim. I had to stop for the night. There she stood in the doorway. I heard the mission bell. I was thinking to myself, this could be heaven or this could be hell. Could this mean the narrator has died and is now entering a different realm? He's telling us that he's not thinking clearly. He has a heavy head and dim sight. He's unsure whether he's about to enter heaven or hell, and he fears he might be facing his final judgment day. A rather cryptic lyric that backs this up is this small line: "Bring your alibis." Why on earth would you need an alibi to enter a hotel? Will the narrator be asked to provide evidence of the good things he did in his life in order to enter heaven? If that's the case, I would assume that by the end of the song, it's revealed where he truly is based on these lyrics. "Relax," said the nightman. "We are programmed to receive. You can check out any time you like, but you can never leave." To me, this would imply imprisonment rather than a place that is unimaginably beautiful. Mirrors on the ceiling, the pink champagne on ice. And she said we are all just prisoners here of our own device. That's undoubtedly a fascinating theory. I think we're getting closer to the truth. Some have pointed out that colitas is a Spanish slang term for a certain plant that people will smoke to alter their state of mind. I can't remember which one. On a dark desert highway, cool wind in my hair, warm smell of colitas rising up through the air. Oh, right, and the initials for the Hotel California include the letters T, H, and C, which gives us THC. Why do those letters sound familiar? So maybe the lyrics are about a wacky drug trip. The hotel he has arrived in could really just be a figment of his imagination as he goes on his trip. He's possibly hallucinating or having visions. Band could be making a statement about the brutal nature of addiction and showing us the downward spiral of someone who abuses drugs. The last lines of the song suggest that the narrator might be hopelessly hooked on his drugs. You can check out anytime you like, but you can never leave. That is, the person addicted to the substances can stop using them, sure, but they will always haunt him. His past will never completely leave him alone. The person's mental health has suffered as a result of a partying lifestyle, and this was a rising concern in society during the 60s and 70s, especially in places like California, known for its hedonistic way of life. He's in a different kind of hell altogether, living out a sort of madness. So now we're all familiar with a few of the more prominent theories about the song, and they're all very interesting, to be honest. But what about the satanic connection that we talked about in the beginning? We still have some unanswered questions there. Well, luckily for us, the writers of the song have told the public what the song was about in their own words in several different interviews over the years. According to Don Henley, the song is a metaphor for the American dream. He wrote it about the dark underbelly of American life. As a band that had just shot up so high on the charts with so many majorly successful songs, they really were living life in the fast lane. They were constantly reminded of what it was like to be put on a pedestal as rock stars. All the hedonism, materialism, overconsumption, and everything that goes along with it. The song was a way of talking about the realities of being in a mega successful band. When asked in a 2016 CBS interview, Henley said, Well, I always say it's a journey from innocence to experience. It's not really about California, it's about America. It's about the dark underbelly of the American dream. It's about excess. It's about narcissism. It's about the music business. It's about a lot of different, it can have a million interpretations. The Eagles members were all from different parts of the country, particularly the Midwest. They moved to Los Angeles because it was the mecca for musicians wanting to be in bands in that era. So you can see how there was a very personal connection for them. They undoubtedly felt like guests at some weird hotel. The hotel has also been described as a metaphor for California itself, a place full of people who weren't really from there but came to stay for whatever reason. If we look at some of the lyrics with this new perspective, we begin to see a different picture. Let's look at this verse again. So I called up the captain, please bring me my wine. He said, we haven't had that spirit here since 1969. In this instance, he could be referring to the spirit of 1969 as the spirit of the hippie movement and the free love that came to an end in 1969 when the Rolling Stones played a notoriously awful concert at Altamont. Not that the band played the music badly, though. I mean, the concert itself was a disaster. It was supposed to be a fun, free concert for everyone, full of free love, but it ended with death, and it was a symbolic end to the whole decade. The captain that the song mentions might actually be delighted by this new person's request because he hasn't seen that free love spirit since 1969, and he's so glad someone wants to make things fun again. Or he could simply be denying his request altogether, saying, sorry, buddy, we don't have any alcohol to offer anyone anymore. Don't you know that the free love spirit has been gone since 1969? But perhaps the most crucial nail in the coffin to the whole question about Anton LaVey comes from a 2002 interview Joe Walsh had with Salt Lake City Weekly. They asked, is it true that on the cover of Hotel California, late Church of Satan founder Anton LaVey is seen standing in one of the hotel windows? Joe Walsh replied, absolutely not. Any reference to Satan or anything like that is completely in the eyes of whoever is thinking that. That's a reflection of how sick they are. The guy in the window is one of the Electra Asylum publicity guys. The lighting just happened to be bad, and he was really shy, so he was just peeking around the corner. So yes, there was a man with a bald head and a goatee, but that doesn't necessarily make him the leader of the Church of Satan. In reality, I think I believe Joe on this one. And remember when we talked about the part about can't kill the beast? And in the master's chambers, they gathered for the feast. They stab it with their steely knives, but they just can't kill the beast. Well, perhaps stabbing with steely knives is another reference to drug culture and not necessarily the beast from the book of Revelation. Steely Knives refers to both the band Steely Dan, whom they had a small rivalry with at the time because they had the same manager, and the needles that are used to administer certain drugs. This applies to the whole song is a metaphor for drugs theory, yes, but drugs are more just a part of the story and not the whole thing. Certainly drugs had a profound effect on society and did a lot of harm. It's actually quite poetic when you put it all together. Consider that what he is trying to say is that no matter how many times a user gets high, gathering for a feast, they will never kill the beast or conquer their demons. The beast is their addiction and whatever led them to start taking drugs. Their addiction will only get worse and they won't be able to get rid of whatever demons they have inside. A lot of people will turn to substance abuse to try and feel better about things that have happened to them, either physically, emotionally, or both, but the substances will never be able to cure them of the underlying problem. And how about colitas being a reference to drugs? Well, yes, it turns out that colitas is slang for marijuana, but colitas is also a type of plant that grows in the desert and produces a unique smell too, which proves once again how masterful the double meanings of the lyrics really get. Bravo, guys. It also turns out that the feeling I had when I first heard the song as a kid, that feeling that the song has transported you to some creepy sort of alternate dimension, wasn't too far off either. Guitarist Glenn Frey has compared the lyrics and the nonlinear structure of the song to an episode of The Twilight Zone, which is one of my favorite TV shows of all time, by the way. Interestingly, Disneyland's California Adventure theme park, also located not too far from Hollywood, featured a ride called Twilight Zone Tower of Terror for years and years. Isn't it also not a coincidence that the ride itself is supposed to be based on other famous hotels of old Hollywood? That ride always made me feel sick, not just because it dropped down in such a quick pace, but I actually really felt like I was in the Twilight Zone each time I go on it. But I do have a wild imagination, I guess. So, is there a real Hotel California physically? A lot of people still want to know if there's a real place, a real Hotel California somewhere. And sadly, the answer to that is pretty much no. However, with that being said, one could argue that the song is based on the Beverly Hills Hotel for three main reasons. For starters, the band had spent a lot of time in that hotel and was very familiar with it. Secondly, it's obviously both a hotel and in California, like thousands of others, but it has a pretty special and rich history. Many of the Hollywood elite have been known to stay there over the years. I'm sure a ton of weird stuff has happened there. And lastly, and probably most importantly, because it's featured on the cover of the album. Yes, the band hired photographer David Alexander to take a photo of the Beverly Hills Hotel in a way that would make it look dark and sinister. He had to spend hours trying to get the perfect shot of it. He waited for the sun to go down at just the right time, and remember back then they didn't have digital cameras, so he would have no idea if he got the right shot or not until they developed the film later on. And the Beverly Hills Hotel would eventually try to sue for the use of their image on the cover, but that was settled when it was pointed out that the hotel had tripled its business since the album was released. So this all adds to the metaphorical nature of the lyrics. It could really be any hotel you want it to be. Now, in conclusion, no matter what you believe the song to be about, the fact is that it's okay. It's up to you. It's open for interpretation. That's the beauty of it and of music in general. But one thing is for sure, Hotel California is an incredibly well-crafted song that deserves all of the praise and notoriety that it has received over the years. I'd also like to make a quick mention that one of my favorite covers of the song is by Los Lobos, a Chicano rock group. They add even more of a Latin influence to it, and it's phenomenal. In one of my favorite movies, The Big Lebowski, John Turturro's character, Jesus, is first introduced to us at the bowling alley, and their version of the song is playing in the background. The way that they choreographed it all is perfect. If you haven't seen that movie, I'd recommend you do so soon. And it has some other Eagles related jokes too. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this deep dive into the history and folklore of Hotel California. I had a great time researching and learning more about a song that I've loved for ages. Just goes to show that there's always more to a situation than meets the eye, especially with anything extremely popular and in pop culture. Let me know if you agree or disagree with any of the points I brought up in the comments. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to the podcast and leave a 5-star review if you would be so kind. That definitely does a lot to help the show get picked up.